Welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show, the show where we bring people from the community on to talk about who they are and what they do. And today our guest is Amy Comachero. Amy is the owner, chief baker, and head cook at Amy's Bakery Arts Cafe on Main Street, the home of the finest pastries, cookies, cakes, artisan breads, excellent lunches, and many other delights. I'm sure most of you have been in and out of there more than once. She opened her bakery in 2000 at the turn of the century, and post-pandemic, she was able to renovate, creating a beautifully revitalized space with one of Main Street's best views of the river and Mount Wantasticus. Hi, Amy.
Hello, Wendy. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on the show. We've needed to have a baker on the show. Well, actually, we had Jeffrey Hamelman, so that was a long time ago. And you have been kind of on his heels, actually, right? When he left town,
Yes.
you started up.
I knew that was a certain opening
Oh,
when they left town,
uh-huh.
and I made my move.
Oh,
Mhm.
and so you were already in Brattleboro by that time.
Yeah, I had been working at the Common Ground, Max's Restaurant, Latches,
Oh,
Brew Pub.
Yeah.
And then I knew there was an opening and that the town needed a bakery.
yeah. Did you go straight to Main Street?
Yes, I've been in that spot the whole time.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that.
Mhm.
So when you were working at the other places, definitely they were different eras in Brattleboro, town-wise. Common Ground, of course, is iconic. When you were you always cooking, or was it
I
baking?
was cooking some at the Common Ground and baking at the Common Ground. After that, I was pretty much baking
Uh-huh.
pastries and breads. Yeah.
And was that's something that you were drawn to from the get-go?
Yeah, when I was 17, I had my first job in a hippie bakery in the Adirondacks, and that sort of sparked my interest.
Mm-hmm. So did you start as a kid being interested in cooking?
Yeah, at home I was always dabbling
You
and
were-
watching Julia Child and doing
Oh,
her
you did?
recipes.
Did you watch The Galloping Gourmet?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I watched all the cooking shows.
There weren't that many, not like there are now.
Right.
Yeah,
It was rare.
yeah.
And I would also cut school sometimes and go to the library to read magazines and cookbooks.
Oh, really?
So that was sort of my passion.
Oh, and was that part of your family culture as well?
We were into food. My grandmother was a great cook from Turkey, and I think I got her genes.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it does come down that way.
Right.
You know, my mother was a great cook, but that didn't translate
Oh,
very well.
so you didn't get the genes.
I guess not. When you talked about being in a hippie bakery in the Adirondacks at 17, what kinds of things were you doing there?
Well, they were making bagels and breads,
Ah,
and they would let me experiment. They
uh-huh.
said, just go do your thing. And so I made up different pastries from books that I read. And it was fun because they would go swimming and they would leave me to man the shop. And they thought it was great. And none of us had any idea that later I would own a bakery.
Yeah.
And that was my thing.
Have you been in touch with any of those people?
Yeah, a couple of them moved to Putney. 25 years later, we ran into each other.
Wow.
And we're friendly
Uh-huh.
and in touch. Yeah.
And so after the Adirondacks, you went back to New York City, which is
I went to college,
Oh.
Oberlin College,
uh-huh.
for 2 years. I did drop out and went to San Francisco, worked in a pickle factory, an olive and pickle factory. And then I came east and I did meet up with Matt Blau.
Mm-hmm.
And we started a sushi delivery service in New York City.
Wow.
So we had guys on bikes. We would make the sushi and we would send it off with guys riding bikes to deliver it around town. And we were written up in the New York Times once.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for catering. We did catering.
Yeah.
That
That must
was
have been tricky with delivering sushi to keep it cold and fresh.
Yeah, we had only a certain radius, the Upper West
Yeah.
Side.
Yeah.
But in the winter and snow, sometimes these guys would go out on bikes
Wow.
delivering food.
And that was kind of early for sushi, wasn't it?
Yes, it was at the start of the
Yeah.
craze, the
Yes.
fad. Mhm.
And did you follow that, the interest in sushi and, cooking? It's not really cooking, it's assembling really more than anything, right?
Well, you have to know your fish. You have to be a knife expert. It's all about the cutting
Oh.
and the quality of the fish.
Uh-huh.
So Matthew knew a lot about this, and
Uh-huh.
I made all the makis, the rolls,
Mm-hmm.
and he did all the slicing of the
Oh.
fish.
How,
It was lovely product.
yeah.
Good.
How did he learn that?
Well, he had gone to cooking school in New York City,
Oh,
and he was just a talent. You know, some people
yes.
had a talent.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And for the audience, Matt Blau, for those of you who don't know, he had, when he came to Brattleboro, he had Max's Bistro
Mhm.
in West Brattleboro, and then Fireworks, which is now Echo, up until, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago, probably. So he was kind of a personage, but he's remained a good friend.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
good friends.
And you commiserate?
Yeah, well, he helped me with the renovation. I did work at Max's restaurant
Mm-hmm.
as the pastry chef there, and yeah, we've done a lot of projects together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Max's Bistro was great. I have really fond memories of that place. I feel like a lot of people didn't know about it because it was West Brattleboro
Right.
in an old house. But it had a really great atmosphere. And also, I think it was one of the first places in town where you walked in and that was the kitchen. And you watched
Open
people cook.
kitchen,
Yeah.
right.
Open kitchen concept. Yeah. It was really, it was groundbreaking in a way, especially for Brattleboro at that time, because that was early 90s.
Yes, my daughter was 5. So yeah. Mid 90s, yeah.
Did you and Matt come together to Brattleboro?
Essentially, I moved up here and then he came within a year.
And why Brattleboro?
Well, my brother went to SIT and I wanted to leave New York City for a quieter place. And he said, come check out Brattleboro. And so here we are.
I'm glad you did. You were born in New York City?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do you have a big family?
No, I have one brother.
Oh. I guess we all think that people in New York City have big families for some reason.
We're normal people.
Do you miss it?
No, I'm not a city. It's too stimulating, too much.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a country lover.
Well, it's nice to have realized that, right?
Yeah. This is more my pace.
Yep. Yeah, restaurants in New York are...
Well, that's a whole different
It's a
world.
whole different thing, yeah. Do you read much now about cooking? And
I do.
Do you?
Yeah, and I love to watch TV competition shows, cooking and baking.
Yeah, I know. For not being a cook at all, I love to read about food and cooking. Like Lori Colwyn, who is a writer for Bon Appetit, I believe, fabulous writer, and I would just love her writing about cooking, you know. And I don't know why. I think that it partly is there's something very satisfying about hearing about, you know, stories. And the other great book is Blood, Bones, and Butter. Gabrielle Hamilton, who had the restaurant Prune in New York.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yes, that's an amazing. Oh, it's an amazing story.
Okay.
Yeah, really worth reading.
Okay.
So, Amy, when you opened up your bakery it was November of 2000, that was kind of a interesting time business-wise. How did that go?
It was right before 9/11.
Yeah.
So, but as far as Brattleboro went, I think it was a good time. There was the opening. People wanted a bakery.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it was.
Yeah. And you did okay setting it up and getting staffing and.
I did. It's a project, and it's always much more than you anticipate. And I was new to owning a business and running a business myself. So it's a big project. Yeah.
And continues to be.
It is.
Yes. You've had a lot of iterations as well, which I think is one thing that's been really interesting about your business, which we can go into a little bit. But I've been so impressed with how loyal people are to you and to the bakery. And so I know that was it in 2015, I think that you were thinking of selling at that point. And there was sort of public outrage about you leaving.
Yeah, and my staff rallied.
Yes.
I had sort of just reached the end of my rope. I was exhausted, and but my staff rallied, and somehow I found the energy to continue.
Yeah, you had some cool staff people. You had John Carson.
Yeah, John Carson.
John Carson, yes. Yeah.
Passed away.
Yes, and Jeffrey Hamilton also mentioned him as being really, I think he was the first person to hire him.
Yes.
Yes, and he thought he was very unlikely, but he turned out to be just fabulous.
Right, he saw the talent. and
Yes,
John.
that's right, right. And Leslie Mayette
Hmm.
helped a lot at some point there.
Yeah, she was the manager for over 10 years.
Wow.
She did some years, then left and came back,
Mm-hmm.
and she did the art shows for years,
Uh-huh.
and she managed the place,
Yeah.
so that I
Yes.
could have time off.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
that must have helped a lot.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, yeah,
definitely.
yeah. She could really manage too. She was
Oh, yeah,
so
she's
good.
awesome.
She
Yeah.
was so good. So during that time, were you really off, or were you baking and not doing the?
No, I would take more days off. There were times when I
Oh.
was only working 3 days a week, which is a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because Leslie could run the place.
Yeah, and you've gotten into doing more things like more lunches, more really fabulous soups and sandwiches, but also some little breakfast things for those people, those hangers-on who come in early in the morning, right? And
they
need
want
an egg.
protein. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. We do that. I wish we did a full breakfast thing, but
it's tricky.
I haven't been able to. The town needs that, though.
So what time do you open?
Right now we open 9 a.m., which is a little late, but
yeah,
post-COVID, things became tricky, hiring people. It feels like people sort of learned who they were during COVID in a certain way, and they have their limits, is what I experienced,
Yeah. Well, downtown, too, changed so much during COVID. I remember, when you first got here, and certainly when I first got here, which was in the 80s, everything was 9 to 5,
Right.
and some things were open Friday. I can't really remember Friday nights that well, but over the years, the hours have really changed. And if you go downtown Brattleboro now at 9 o'clock in the morning, there's not much happening.
Right. And after 6 p.m., there's nothing happening.
Right.
I mean, restaurants.
Right. I think that that's changing. I think that there are younger people who are stepping up, whether it's restaurants or businesses, to stay open longer.
Okay.
And music.
Right.
There's some great music venues that are happening. Yeah, it's great to see that. Going back a little bit to the business of owning a food business in general, you're dealing with so many different things. And I know the margins are really slim. You've got staffing going on all the time. There's keeping up fresh inventory as well. Yeah.
Okay, so you have a handle. It's not a bookstore and it's not a clothing store. No disrespect to anybody who owns those, but a lot of moving parts.
Yes.
And the reality is that food burns and things happen and product comes in. We need to work with that product and transform it.
Right.
It's not something that sits on the shelf.
That's right.
So it's intensive labor.
Yeah.
And it's like cooking Thanksgiving every day for 300 people, essentially, is one way to understand what's involved.
That's a harsh, that's harsh to think of it that way. But it is what you must be really riding a tightrope a lot.
Yeah, it's you have to have a passion for it.
Yeah,
because it's a labor of love.
Yeah. Actually, I ran across your original mission statement, which you probably remember, to create a home away from home kitchen to provide delicious, nutritious, comforting food that could sustain the people of the town.
Yep, that continues to be the goal.
Yeah, and I think, when you walk into Amy's and you see, people in the front windows, people outside in good weather, which is really great. There's so few places in town where you can sit outside, and have a cup of coffee or sit with your laptop. How have laptops changed the business?
Yeah, well, people come in and sit with one cup of coffee for 4 hours.
Yep.
Which is good. That's what a cafe is for.
Yeah.
And if I didn't own a cafe, I would be the first one sitting at the table all day.
Yeah. So it's not frustrating.
No, that's what we're here for. We're hosting. Here's a table. Enjoy.
I think that kind of generosity really shows, in the way, not only in the way you're running the business, but in the way it feels when you walk in the door.
Oh, good.
Yeah. That's why you get so many people coming back day after day after day, for one thing.
We hope, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you do. I see a lot of familiar faces in there.
A lot of regular.
For a while, you were doing monthly art shows. And is that something you're picking up again?
Well, before COVID, we did change the art show once or twice. every other month is what I mean. Since COVID, we've had Lydia Thompson there the whole time, and I've loved her work.
Yeah.
Soon, West Brattleboro Arts are going to come in.
Yeah.
And they will put up their works.
And so they'll take care of that as well as displaying and everything.
Yeah, that's our plan.
Oh, good. That would be nice. That's a large group of artists. Yeah, so it's a good amount to
right, and they can rotate.
Yeah. So you'll just hand it over to them, pretty much. Yeah,
that is what we're talking about.
It's a good idea, and that will probably also be part of Gallery Walk.
Yeah, right now we're not open later, but we'll see.
Right, that's a good point.
You have to stay open later.
Right.
We may. We'll see.
Yeah, at some point, it would be lovely to have Friday nights, like not just Gallery Walk, but Friday nights in general be open. Not necessarily, I don't think people expect a bakery to be open necessarily at night, but for certainly other things, it would be nice to have, like when we used to have WT Grants and that was before my time, Woolworths and Mann's, like real department stores, so families would come out on Friday nights and shop. Yeah, maybe those days will come back. Good old days. Yeah. There are a lot of good old days. There are a lot of bad old days as well. Amy, during the pandemic, you applied for a restaurant revitalization fund. How did that go for you? Well, obviously it's gone very well because the results are fabulous. Was it tough getting one?
Well, it wasn't tough. They prioritized women and minority-owned businesses, which was nice. And I did what had to be done and got in the door, and it was a generous program by the government to keep restaurants afloat.
Yeah.
And it was very helpful.
Yes. And has that helped with the clientele, do you think? Have you noticed an uptick in that?
Most people comment on the renovation.
Yes.
And they appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why I mentioned the view, because you put in a new window in the back, and it
highlights.
It's fabulous. It's really wonderful.
Another thing that you're reminding me of is the program called Everyone Eats.
Yes.
That Vermont did.
Right.
Which was really a lifesaver for a lot of restaurants during the pandemic. Right. Restaurants would prepare food, and it was delivered to people who needed it, no questions asked, and the government paid the restaurants to provide this food.
Yeah.
And it was very helpful for people who needed food and to the restaurants who were.
I'm so glad you remembered to bring that up, because that was such a huge thing in Brattleboro.
Yeah, it was a brilliant idea.
It was. And Stephanie Bonin had a lot to do with organizing that for Brattleboro and getting that happening. But I remember there would be lines of cars,
waiting for food.
Yep. And it really worked. And so where were you in that program?
When we reopened, we made sandwiches, maybe 80 sandwiches once or twice a week, and they were picked up and brought to a distribution place. So we did that for some months until they did finally end the program.
Right, but it seemed like it lasted a long time.
Yeah, it was a couple years. I think it was really the whole COVID stretch.
It was the most difficult part of COVID, when people really were needing a lot of food. Amazing that they did it,
Very smart.
Yeah. Amy, we were talking about staffing and getting, the right people to come in, and what it takes to be a good part of your team. I know you've had varying ages, which I think is interesting, and a lot of younger people who have, I think, been fabulous in my experience. Yeah. What does it take to be part of your team?
We want people who are team players, who understand that serving the public is what we're doing.
Yeah.
The customer is always right, in my mind, which means they have to leave happy. And we can do that with a smile, with a cookie, whatever it takes.
Right.
And we play as a team. We're not bickering in front of the house, back of the house. So I try to run a family style.
Yeah.
Sometimes that bites me because the staff become too friendly and too close with each other. But it's about service.
Yeah.
And enjoying what we're doing and learning too. Techniques and recipes. And
Are you training people on the job a lot?
Yes, definitely.
And baking?
Training.
Yeah.
Come in,
everything.
we'll teach you.
Yeah. One thing that that feels like the foundation of the bakery, but of your business too, is sort of what your mission statement is saying, is that it's really about serving the community and really embedding yourself in the community, you know, and being part of it.
Yeah. I do. I really love food as medicine also. And I'm very interested in nutrition and healing. And so I feel sometimes badly that I'm serving sugar, so much sugar.
Right.
But I try to balance that with the good food. We're serving bone broth these days, which is very healing. So I've studied a lot about food and healing.
And you continue
food
to.
Is medicine. Yes.
Yeah, nutrition, right? Yeah. And I think that certainly shows in the things you have for lunch items and soups. A soup is a great place to throw in a lot of nutrition, right?
Yes, exactly.
How did bone broth get to be such a big deal? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, but it's really helpful and healing. Yeah.
But have we not always known about it?
Well, Jewish grandmothers did, and the Chinese do. All cultures serve a good chicken stock or a good bone broth.
Right.
And there's penicillin in that. In that broth.
So
the cultures knew. The ancient cultures have always known.
Yeah.
And we're coming back to that.
Well, it's nice to see them rise up again for us to be able to implement in different ways. Amy, you've been on Main Street for, oh my gosh, like 25 years.
Well, yes, close.
Yeah. If you started in 2000. Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty darn close to 25 years. It's really hard
number.
I know it is. It's very shocking. It's a quarter of a century. You've seen a lot of changes in the town. In so many different ways, and a lot of tumultuous things like Hurricane Irene coming through, and the Brooks Library or the Brooks House fire, the changes in that building alone, the Shriners building, you know, which has now been renovated, and Molesey is back, things like that. But we also have all seen, obviously, an increase in the unhoused on Main Street. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of opinion, there's a lot of people being divided about that. Where do you stand, and how is the bakery becoming part of where it is now on Main Street?
Yeah, well, when we came back after COVID, I decided to do an experiment, is the way I like to think about it, to give food to people who needed it. That's what we have, and to see what our society might be like if we were to give each other what we need. If we have something, we give it. So I sort of opened the doors and said, anybody who needs food, I will give you a sandwich, a cookie, coffee, whatever it is. And we did that for quite a while. Very controversial. Some people really supported it. Some people did not appreciate it, feeling that it was encouraging the issues that this population brings with them. So it's very controversial. And then the reality is that you're dealing with folks who have serious issues, and they're in a cafe, in a public place, and not always behaving in publicly accepted ways. So it was very complicated. I'm glad I did it, but I've now cut that program, meaning I don't give to everybody. Occasionally someone needs something, they come to me, I will give them what they ask for or need. But it was causing too much hullabaloo in the community.
Yes. And you also establish relationships with a lot of people, right?
Yes.
And so you got to know them.
And I have seen transformation in some of them in good ways. Some due to their being given drugs that they needed or such. But some of them have sort of stepped up and become more functioning citizens.
Yes, right.
It's been interesting.
Yeah, it's been interesting and difficult and challenging and everything. I know Dick DeGray was on the show a few years ago, and he talked about how, you know, he had, I think, one, maybe two two young guys who were working with him, and he said it was just great. And it's sort of like that one-on-one thing can really work, you know, when people get to know you, when you look in each other's eyes, and you know, that kind of thing. But it does feel like there's some things that are not sustainable at this point, you know. And I think that that's something that everyone is trying to evaluate and deal with in many different kinds of ways.
Yes.
It's still Main Street Brattleboro. It's still our community. These are still people who are part of our community. And so it's negotiating in a way that we haven't been called to.
No,
you know,
it's very complicated.
Yep.
And there is a lot of behind the scenes movement and work and discussion going on, trying to figure out how to handle.
And there's so many people working in many different ways with individuals and places like Groundworks and Turning Point, and you know, we do not lack for services. We do not, and resources. It's pretty remarkable. Amy, this has been fun.
Thank you.
It's been great. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. And,
thank you for doing it.
It's nice to have, I always thought it would be really fun to have like a flip book of Main Street. You know, those flip books
over the years?
Yeah, over the years. You know, so you could see what was
changed.
Like when 103 Main Street used to be the bakery.
The
Dutch Bake Shop.
Dutch
Bake Shop.
People tell me about that.
That's now the Stoop. Right down from you. Yeah. I'm really in favor of stoops in a community.
You love stoops?
I just think it's great for people on Main Street to be able to stop and sit. I've seen people playing chess from time to time. Yes. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you
so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us today and hearing Amy Comachero tell her stories about her shop on Main Street, Amy's Café and Bakery. Which so many of us are familiar with, and so glad to be able to walk into and get a good cup of coffee and something great to eat. Stay tuned. We will be back again with someone else from the community. And thanks for being with us.